Nine out of 10 extremely poor people will come from Africa by the year 2030. Now, that is a startling statistic from the World Bank. It is a statistic that troubles me a lot, but one that I'm convinced can and will be changed within my own generation. I intend to spend the next 15 minutes to demonstrate to you, but also to convince you that Africa need not and will not remain the SI unit of poverty as has been made to be. I'd like to start by sharing my story. I started off my career in banking from straight from the University of Nairobi, and I was all set to climb the corporate ladder. I intended to make a lot of money and buy a good house, a nice car, marry a beautiful wife, and live happily ever after. Well, that was until my grad march was halted by some little children. I used to meet these children on my way to work just by Mada Hospital. They came from the Mukuru slums, and I would help them to cross the ever-busy road on their way to school. These children became my friends, and it was a routine for me to stop by the roadside and wait for them and help them cross the road. I kept thinking and reflecting about them over and over again, and I couldn't get them out of my mind. And I wondered, will they be able to break out of this poverty cycle that they are so confined in, even by education? And over time, the voice became louder and louder, and I finally answered the call. And so I resigned from my job at Barclays Bank and joined the army of poverty fighters. It's been 15 years of fighting poverty through microfinance, through philanthropy, through social entrepreneurship, and impact investment. I'd like to just share my reflection on the effectiveness of some of these poverty fighting models. And the first one I want to share with you is aid, or philanthropy, if you like. Now, aid is the earliest poverty intervention in Africa. The model presupposes that by injecting aid as an input, you get poverty reduction as an output. So how has this model worked? By the year 2008, Africa had received $1 trillion in aid. Now, that translates to about $5,000 to every living African today. So if that was the input, what has been the output? Statistics show us that poverty actually did reduce, and the proportion of Africans living below the poverty line reduced from 57% to 43%. But if you factor in the population growth, the number actually grew. But what I want to share with you again is that there's no statistical evidence that establishes a causality relationship between aid and economic growth. But there is evidence to the contrary. When aid increased in Africa from 5% to 17% of the GDP in the 1990s, economic growth actually declined from 2% to negative. Now, I must say that aid has made some contribution in fighting poverty, albeit marginally. The second model I'd like to discuss with you is a microfinance model. Now, microfinance refers to the provision of financial services to the poor. This model, popularized by one Professor Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh, was founded on the premise that the poor need small loans at low interest rates that would help them to establish and expand their small businesses, that would help them build their income levels and then be able to liberate them from poverty. Muhammad so believed in this model that he declared that poverty will only be confined in our museums. So has this model delivered? Now, to start with, poverty is not yet in the museum. We're living with it every day. But let me just unpack some insights about this model that can help us understand what has made it not deliver as had been promised. Now, microfinance was intended to keep interest rates low and spur economic growth. But it was realized earlier on that to be able to provide small micro loans to many poor people is a complex and a very expensive affair. So this model needed to be subsidized by donors. And so the early success stories that you read about microfinance were all donor funded, including the Grameen Bank of Mohammed Yunus. Now, as the donor funding started dwindling, and with the pressure to attain financial sustainability, the microfinance institutions evolved into profit-maximizing financial institutions. And with that, providing low-interest, small loans to the poor was no longer tenable. And therefore, this model started issuing loans that were more expensive even than commercial banks. Now, we can't say that microfinance has not worked, because the truth of the matter is it has contributed financial access to the economically active poor. But to the poor of poor, it has pushed them deeper into poverty through over-indebtedness and through loss of their meager assets through their aggressive collection practices. So, why are these models that are world-renowned promising so much and delivering so little? It is easy to say and argue that probably they have simplified poverty to be this simple humanitarian setback that just requires a dose of aid or small loan to cure it. While in fact, poverty is a complex phenomenon that is systemic and mindset-driven. But I want to suggest to you that these models have in fact focused too much on poverty reduction, that they've been caught up in a vicious cycle of analysis by paralysis. You know, when you focus too much on a problem, you lose the opportunity to actually solve that problem. And poverty reduction is akin to a serendipitous occasion or occurrence. Just after you've stopped over focusing on it or just looking at it, there you get a breakthrough. Let me say this. We've seen nations overcome poverty. And we need to start shifting our focus from fighting poverty to building wealth. Just over the last 2 decades, China has lifted 300 million of its people from poverty through economic growth, while the Asian tigers of Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea has managed to transform their people through their SME sector. It cannot be different for Africa. We need to start shifting towards focusing on wealth growth. James Mwangi, one of Africa's leading business leaders, said as follows: the problem with Africa is poverty. And the cure for poverty is wealth creation. And the creators of wealth are entrepreneurs. Now, the tragedy of Africa is entrepreneurs, the real wealth creators of our continent, have been sidelined and downtrodden. We need to shift and start thinking about how we can create a thriving entrepreneurship ecosystem that is going to unlock Africa's potential. And for us to be able to do that, we need to fix some systems that have been broken and that have brought us to this place. And I want to reflect on 3 of those systems. The first system we need to fix is our broken value system. Now, corruption and years of failed leadership have yielded a very hostile business environment that erodes trust, increases cost, and has detrimental effect on entrepreneurship. That environment alone is responsible for the high failure rate of small businesses across this continent. We've got to fix this system if we are going to come up with a thriving ecosystem. How do we do this? First, we need to create a system that begins to incentivize good values, because capital markets don't do that. We need to incentivize and recognize good values one business at a time. And over time, we'll be able to create a community across Africa of value-based entrepreneurs that will transform our environment. It's this call that I answered to when we established and co-founded the African Council for Accreditation and Accountability, AFCA in short. And AFCA works to restore public confidence in organizations and businesses through awareness creation, advocacy, and accreditation. AFCA's seal of approval sets apart those organizations that operate ethically and thereby can be considered trusted, and they can attract investment. But AFCA is not alone in this journey. We have got Ethical Leadership Network, ELNET, and Unashamedly Ethical in South Africa that are all working to fixing this broken value system. The second system we need to fix is our broken education system. Now, our education system is designed to produce workers and technicians instead of producing innovators and problem solvers. It is common to find a qualified agricultural engineer working as a bank clerk, and yet he comes from a farming area using very, practices of farming that could be improved, but he doesn't see the connection of his training and the solution he can provide. That's a reality of our education. And the fixation to looking for a job denies the opportunity to look for problems that we face as a continent. We now need to inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs that are purpose-driven and that are going to find the solution to the most pressing problems that we face. Now, how can this be done? We need to start establishing business incubation and accelerators and technical advisors. The good news, we're having organizations like iHub and NILAB, Nairobi Garage, TBN, where I used to work. We've got Strathmore Business School and Climate Innovation Center doing a fantastic job of fixing this system. The third broken system that we need to fix is our financial system. It is broken. While capital has flowed freely in the West to fund the largest and the smallest businesses, in Africa, the small and medium-sized enterprises are falling in what we call the missing middle. They are too big for the informal market lenders, but too small for the private capital market. What is interesting, however, is that billions of money is flowing into the SME sector. In fact, 123 billion Kenya shillings is expected to be channeled into the East African market in the next 5 years. The question is, where is this money going if our entrepreneurs are not accessing this money? Now, part of the reason is that, as per the research conducted by Village Capital, 90% of all this money coming goes to the expatriate-founded enterprises. And another 5% goes to local entrepreneurs who've been trained abroad. So the local entrepreneurs are left to share 5%. Why is that the case? Perception of risk. Now we need to fix this system. And here is my proposal of how we can fix this system. First, we need to come up with local money. We need to establish local venture funds. We've got a high number of high network individuals that have got the capacity to fund our small enterprises. But also we've got a network of other smaller investors. We call them angel investors. We need to establish a formal network of angel investors that can bite more risk and be able to put investment into small startups and even at idea stage. I started Zaka International, a peer-to-business lending platform to fix part of this problem. Zaka International connects entrepreneurs to potential lenders who provide short-term working capital to small entrepreneurs at negotiated rates. My friends, that is my contribution in building this ecosystem. I believe you who seated here has got a contribution to make, each one of us. You can make a contribution either by jumping into this bandwagon of entrepreneurship or supporting the building of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. You can apply for accreditation. You can enjoin to the ethical network and help fix this system. But also, you can support, mentor a young entrepreneur. You can also choose to lend through the platform or even invest equity to these enterprises. You know, my dear Africans, we've got a battle of our lifetime. We cannot afford to be passive bystanders. We've got to step in. We need every boot on the ground. We cannot wait for the World Bank and the UNCDF to come and try and fix our poverty here. We've got to do it if we are to reverse that statistic I talked about. And therefore, I want to charge you and encourage you to consider what you can do so that we can be able to spur and establish a thriving entrepreneurship ecosystem that is going to kickstart a whole movement of purpose-driven entrepreneurs transforming Africa. That is a silent evolution. Will you join it? Thank you.